going to, it's a bigger story than I ever would have guessed. And we're going to tackle it kind of in three parts. We're going to talk about the nickname, but it got me thinking, of everyone in Verona, there's probably 4 levels that we know the story at. Think about which one you're at. I know Verona exists. We're all there, okay? I think some of the newer folks to town, as our population grows, I worry this might be all they know off the bat, but it's our job to help them learn more. So we've all hit level 1. Level 2, Verona is called Hometown USA for some reason. This was me in high school in the late 90s. I saw it on the water tower. Okay, that's cute. That was kind of it. Level 3, Hometown USA came from the Vietnam War era somehow. I think most folks are probably here. I was at level 3 up until about 3 months ago. So that's good. I think that's really good. But by the time we end this meeting in a little under an hour, everyone in this room is going to be at level 4, which is the idea is we're going to understand the context of what it meant, to whom it meant that, and kind of the challenge it gives us all if we really want to live up to it. So this is our meeting today, and it's going to happen in 3 parts. The Verona Press, is Maddie here? Maddie's not here, is she? Sometimes Maddie comes from the press. The Verona Press in 1964 hugely plays into this story. So the first part is, I'm going to show you all some articles from 1964 to see what was happening in Verona. I think some of you are probably in some of them. And to kind of paint like what, we know these papers were being read by soldiers, we'll hear more about that, but what were they reading? What were they seeing that led to this? Then we're going to learn about a man named Donald Schmidt, who had a very instrumental part in the formation of this nickname. His wife Noreen is here, and we'll be talking so we can get to know Donald a lot more than we know him. And then the third part is I'm going to show the ripple effects of this nickname throughout the rest of that year, which all this stuff is kind of hiding in old copies of the Verona Press, at the library, newspaper archives online, and as Jenny found out, in the old minutes of the Women's Auxiliary. So if you'll, and feel free to ask questions as you go, but I want to, for part 1, you got to hear me talk some more. What was happening in Verona in 1964 through the eyes of the Verona Press? Well, first I just got to get this out of the way. Anytime you look at old newspapers, the prices on things is the most entertaining, fun part. So I just have to put this out there. It is so much fun seeing that potatoes were 10 pounds for 39 cents. Let's see, a rump roast was 79 cents a pound, round steak 75 cents. Oh my goodness, what else? We've got, I love this, the fish fry at the Legion Bar, fish dinner for $1, or shrimp dinner for $1. I know inflation's been bad recently, but this just really like, have a whole dinner for $1. This is 1964. So I had to show these just to kind of call out the elephant in the room, which is how, nylons, 33 cents a pair if you buy 8 gallons of gasoline. It's been a while since I've purchased some nylons. Anyone know what they cost now? What's a pair of nylons? You don't wear them? This is where I was going to point to Art and embarrass him. Anyone know what a pair of nylons is right now? It's more than $12. $12, you think? 8 to 12. Wow! Well, but if you buy gas, it's cheaper. I enjoy that there were color TVs, but there was also black and white. You pick. You want black and white? You want a new color TV, 21-inch portable. I'm assuming that just means there were wheels on it. That's probably what that was. $146, or sorry, $146.45, $159. So this is TV, as we learned in our meeting 2 months ago, was still kind of new-ish, 15 or so years, that a lot of people in the country had it. I also enjoy some of the wording that, anyone know Buck's Standard Service? I did not, I've seen the name on matchbooks. He talks about how the other day we fixed a tire for a young blonde in 5 minutes. I'm assuming they would phrase that differently today, but it's kind of interesting to see how things were phrased back then.
Wow.
Okay, a new house, if you went to the Verona Lumber Company, which, tie-in, Verona Lumber Company, that was by the tracks, wasn't it?
Yes.
I think that's what Darwin Mutchler's company became later, I think by this time. So that could be a tie-in there. A new house, just the wood and the pieces are $8,000. You gotta put it together yourself though, or find someone, and that's without the foundation. But still, new house, under $10,000, that's pretty cool. Now, what were the big stories of 1966? Well, unsurprising how what is old is new again. Controversy over building schools. How much schools do we need? Because at the time, we had the 1960-ish school down by the cemetery, and now this is 66. This is the upper area you recognize at 300 Richard Street. The upper area, I'll just call it. That was built in '68, I think, per the plaque on the front, but there was a lot of controversy. People saying, we don't need another school. We don't need, why are we being asked the taxpayers to buy 20 more acres? We need it, it's critical. So it's kind of fun to see how some themes just never go away. Growing in debate over new schools, but that was a hot topic in '66. On the topic of schools, some new teachers, if you knew anyone, Sharon Wilson, Miss Giesler, Miss Wilstad, Miss Mary Sump, and Jerry Dalen. They spelled his name wrong, it's Dalen. I actually had Jerry as a science teacher in the 90s. There he is on the right, looking a lot younger than I remember him. Then they had okayed Curtis Jones Field, the name. That was one of our topics like 3 or 4 years ago. So that was happening in '66. A few things around town. Road construction was in the news. Another one that's okay. There was never a time when there was not road construction. This is Walgreens parking lot. This is the old bank building. This is when they widened the street and these guys had to move their entrances to the side. There is old Verona Pharmacy there from about a year ago. We covered that topic. Then it rained, everything flooded, and a grader got stuck in the mud. So road construction on Verona Avenue, big topic. Sharp House. We know how this story ended. Yes. But the Sharp House went through a deal and was purchased by the village. I think they made $75,000 was their offer. It had 12-room house. This is the town. Beautiful Victorian, I think. Someone help me. Home of at least two of our town doctors. This is from March. And then they also did a tour of the Sharp House where you could go in and you could see it. Oh my God, Mom and Dad, why didn't you have me 20 years earlier? I would have loved to be at this. I would have loved to go through the Sharp House and we would have grabbed, anyone at this? Anyone remember? Laura, you were in town. Do you remember going to the Sharp House tour? No, anyone? Oh man, the stuff we would have grabbed. This is currently, I should say for folks who are newer, this is currently where the bank is on the main intersection, kitty corner from the Nance house. It was a Hardee's before that. Okay, so fun little social things. I don't think Ken is here, but Ken and Rick Featherston would write little updates about high schoolers. Where are they going to college after high school, these graduates? And we also had one of these awesome little community things like, Oli Week returned home from the hospital. He's doing nicely. So all this is pre-Facebook, right? This is what y'all did. I'd love to know, how did the reporters find this stuff out? Did people send this in?
Yeah.
They must have, right? They weren't knocking on doors. And also, here's Ken Benke. He was a dinner guest at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Robert Feller and family in honor of Bobby Feller's birthday. It's kind of fun. So small town stuff, you're seeing a theme here. A few more things. Showing off our rural characteristics, we've got a lot about the fireballs, 4-H clubs. Here is Tim Knoll with his steer at the Stoughton Fair. A lot of farming news like that. And there was also a mystery farm. So there's a picture of a farm, and if you guessed it right, you got a free subscription to the Verona Press. And so did them. So every so often there was a mystery farm in there. That's pretty cool. Couple more things, zooming into just the kind of myriad of social topics you saw. Bloodmobile drives were huge. There's Mrs. Fred Miller of the Dane County Hospital Auxiliary handing out free Christmas cards to patients at the county home. Anyone know Mrs. Fred Miller? Just love it when people know these folks, not this one. You know, who was going to beauty school? Here is, if you knew the Reverend Zane Potts family, here are 3 generations all graduating. There's his son James from junior high, daughter Sarah from Verona High School, and Mrs. Potts graduated from Whitewater State. So, Phyllis, did you know Phyllis? Oh my gosh, she was Linda's grade school teacher. What grade do you remember?
I think from 5th grade to 8th at White School.
She taught at White School?
Yeah, she taught at White School.
So I was going to ask you what topic, but if it was White School, it was all of them. Is that her right there, Mama?
Yep.
What do you remember about her? What was she like? Was she strict or was she?
No, she was not strict.
White school teacher. Good connection. I couldn't resist putting this in. This is John Scher's folks. Jim and Claire there at a hometown talent basketball game. They call it the old timers game because the older baseball players would play, like Linus Stomfel, Chuck Stomfel, Jim Coleth, Guy Gust, and Jim Backer. So a lot of fun little things happening around the community. That's Boyd Gentz and Frank Broad, I think, associated with the post office, if I remember hearing from Art. This was a real treat, because I'm trying to look for things related to being in a small town, and then I flip the page, and this is the question of the week. Do you like living in a small town or village? Why? It's like, that is perfect. Oh my gosh. So Miss Leroy McCartney says, I have lived in Madison and like Madison, but I'd rather live here. Yeah, that's right. And then Henry Barker said, in a big city, people don't even know their next door neighbor. I raised a family in a small town. Sorry, I'm going too fast, aren't I? Yeah, I gotta slow down. So Harry Baker said, in a big city, people don't even know their next door neighbor. I've raised a family in a small town. Small town living is better for them. Parents don't need to worry about their children, but grow up in a better way. So this was all in Miller's, these folks were found. And I just had to include this. Apparently donkey baseball was a thing. Yeah, I've heard of donkey basketball. We did that in the 90s once, but there is Carl Fassbend injuring himself. I think he also owned a service station. Mobile, I saw him on some other pages advertising a service station. So, yeah, donkey baseball. Okay, this one's fun too for a small town. This is the Verona Press vehemently denying that we are a, quote, speed trap town. Because there were rumors that AAA had deemed us a speed trap. And here is Hank or someone at the press saying, we called them, they never have. We looked through all of our tickets. People were actually breaking the law. We're not a speed trap town. But I love a small town defending itself against Rosendale. So now I'm going to focus more on community service, which was a big focus of the Vietnam letters. Here is volunteers, JCs, helping fix up the old bank building to become the library. So carrying out the old frame for the safe, painting up. So these are people volunteering their time to what became our bank for quite a number of years in that old building where Walgreens is. Our volunteer fire department, we know Don Stewart, he used to come to our meetings. His memorial fund is why we are a nonprofit. We're a huge debt to the Stewart family for that. If you knew Ray Polda, I know his son comes to these meetings, and I'm missing someone. Oh, obviously Keith Miller in the middle. Keith Miller, obviously. And here they are at like one of the raffles. So community service stuff is featured heavily in the Verona Press in 1966. This is fun, and this is important to remember for later. The Verona Press did a bike contest where if children got 10 new subscriptions, they could go down to Blizzard's and get a free bike. And every week they put who the winner was. So here's Terry Nelson winning the first, junior salesman who sent 10 legitimate annual subscriptions at $4 each during the period of the drive will receive a two-wheel bike absolutely free. Here is Beverly Wagner. Remember this name, she comes back later. Beverly Wagner winning her bike from her subscriptions. And here is John Offerdale, son of Mr. and Mrs. Erling. So this is a pretty cool thing. It comes up a lot, this contest to sell subscriptions and win a bike. Now we're gonna start zooming in more about the armed forces and Vietnam and our service folks. There were quite a few mentions of local soldiers being drafted or going into the war. When people achieved rank or graduated from the Naval Reserve or an academy, they would show up in the Verona Press. And there was also these letters from Vietnam. Here's one from May of 1966 from Roger Rotar. Dear sir, when you receive this letter, I will be on my way home. After serving in Vietnam for 12 months, I will receive my discharge. I just want to take this time to thank you, all the people who made it possible for servicemen in Vietnam to receive the Verona Press. I've enjoyed reading it very much. Then in June, another one gets posted. This is from Donald Schmidt. And he updates his new address, but I'm going to read this because I think it's very important. I'd like to say how much I appreciate your sending the Verona Press to me over here. There are not too many things a person has to look forward to when he is in the boondocks like we are. Mail is the biggest morale builder there is over here, other than the fact that your time is up and you can return to the States. And a hometown newspaper is a great thing. Many thanks again for sending it. It makes the time go a lot faster. So the Verona Press prints this letter from Donald. And this is Donald. This set off a ripple of reactions that led to our nickname. But before we go any further with the clippings, I want to invite Noreen up here, who is Donald's wife. Donald unfortunately passed in 2020. And I remember when Jim Ferroli of the paper told me, it was during pandemic time, he said, yeah, did you know that the fellow who helped get the nickname just passed away? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is on that list of, I wish I would have interviewed him, I wish I would have talked to him, I wish, but you always regret the people you don't interview. So I think having Noreen here today. Everyone please welcome Noreen Schmidt. Yay, Noreen.
My husband was an ordinary boy from an ordinary family in an ordinary rural highway, PD, also McKee Road. And his parents, well, he lived right across the street from Lyman McKee. And he, in the summer months, he would work on the McKee farm. And then after that, later on, he worked for Vince Lacey, who was also a local farmer. And he went to Camp Badger Elementary School, which is now the Fitchburg Serenity House. And when he graduated from Camp Badger, he said that every year they had a different teacher because one teacher had all 8 classes. If you can imagine those little hellions. But, so when he graduated, because they were in the Verona school district, he had a choice to either attend Verona High School or Madison Central, which is downtown Madison, right across from Bethel Lutheran Church. At one time it became the Madison Area Technical College as well. And he enlisted in the Army instead of being drafted because he thought, oh, if I enlist, I won't get sent over to Vietnam. But sorry, he enlisted and he got sent over to Vietnam. And he was in Vietnam in 1965 to 1966. And he was discharged, well, I have to back up. For his R&R, he went to Hong Kong for a week, and he loved Hong Kong. After all these years, he was still talking about Hong Kong, and that he would have re-enlisted if the Army would have promised him another R&R in Hong Kong. And the Army said no. But he, while he was in Vietnam, though, his father had passed. And so Lyman McKee, who knew Senator Robert Kastenmeier, those two worked it out that he was able to come home for his father's funeral. But instead of being sent back to Vietnam, he was sent to Washington, D.C. to fill out his time. But when he was in high school, and a few years after high school, his best friends were Howie Sweevil and Francis Goth, and the three of them were into cars, but they would spend just about every weekend at the Buckley Steel Standard gas station on Main Street. And Francis Goth has since passed, but Howie Sweevil, I believe, also served in Vietnam. Correct, Jenny?
Yes.
Yeah, he also served in Vietnam as well. But while my husband was in Vietnam, and this is where the newspaper comes in, which was so very vital. And I think it was Henry Schrader, who was the publisher of the Verona Press, made it a practice that all those enlisted or all military would get a free subscription. But doing out some of this little research and newspaper clippings, I found that it was the American Legion Auxiliary that paid for the postage for the newspapers to be sent to our military residents. But also the American Legion not only paid for the postage, they also sent care packages with plenty of cookies and bars. And he often talked about those care packages, and I said, oh my gosh, those cookies had to have been rocks. And he said, oh no, those were the best things ever. In fact, he said, we used to go and lick the crumbs out of the bottom of the box. And so then this is where the newspaper comes in. When he was deployed to Vietnam, he was a generator mechanic. And then I think it was about 3 or 4 months into his service, he was reassigned to the 101st Airborne as a radio operator. And I have been told numerous times, because I volunteer at the VA hospital 2 days a week, and the Vietnam vets tell me that he's just lucky to be alive because the radio operators were right up front with all the fighting. But he somehow made it home alive. But So getting back to the newspaper, he said that when he was reassigned to the 101st Airborne, many of those came from the big cities out east, where there wasn't this community of, well, you know, a small town community where you knew each other, and everybody knew your business as well as your own. But so it was like these newspaper clippings, you know, so-and-so went to so-and-so's house for the evening. I remember I grew up in Wanakee, and our newspaper, it was Betty's column, and Betty would put down who was at whose house playing cards, who won, who had a baby. It was like you really knew these people, and you looked forward to the Thursday Wanakee Tribune and Verona Press. So he said these kids, really 18 and 19 from the big cities out east, that didn't have large extended families or this community, heard about, you know, so-and-so getting married, so-and-so having a baby, so-and-so won the bike. In fact, the troop put together a collection, and they sent $10. I think it was either $10 or $20 for the bike. Yeah, and I think the sergeant had said, when the Verona Press arrived, that meant that everybody got mail. It wasn't just my husband, because they passed around this newspaper, and they passed it around, and they passed it around. But he did do his basic training in Mineral Wells, Texas, and that base is no longer. But then he also did training in Fort Leonard in Missouri as well. And being a radio operator, he was also part then of considered the Army Security Force. Being over in Vietnam at that time, he was exposed to Agent Orange. And unbeknownst to him and all of the other soldiers that were in Vietnam exposed to Agent Orange had serious health issues. And he was a severe diabetic that was insulin rejected. He did lose his eyesight, and he did die from Lewy body dementia. But he was a good man. He provided well for us. He worked for Marshall Erdman and Associates, if you're familiar with Marshall Erdman. He was a semi-driver for Marshall, and he would go anywhere from New York City to Florida, New Mexico to the state of Washington. He was home about every other week. But he was a good man. We had a good marriage. We had 2 children, and we have 5 grandchildren. And while working as a semi-driver for Marshall Erdman, he received, he drove over 1 million safe miles without an accident. Maybe a few speeding tickets in there, but no accidents. And then his hobby, when he was still able, he would restore vintage Volvos. And so if you're into cars, well, we went cross country, so I don't know how many car shows. He enjoyed the cars, and I enjoyed a good book. But I did bring some photos of Camp Badger, where all 8th grades are pictured on there with their school teacher, and also his graduating class from 1960, as well as the graduation program. And I also have his graduating yearbook from 1960. And so I'm donating the yearbook as well as the senior class and the senior graduating class program. And I do have a picture of 1985 when the road sign, Welcome to Verona, was dedicated. And I think that Betty Rotar was instrumental in getting that sign erected. And I think Betty was a Hammersley? No? Oh, she was a McKee. Oh, okay. Well, Betty was instrumental in getting that erected. I think that pretty well sums it up. Oh, sure. Yeah, okay. He was active in the VFW organization here in Verona until it folded. They aged out, but then after that he was an active member of the American Legion as well.
Tell us, you mentioned something funny about your first date.
Oh, well.
We got to get to know him personally. I'm sorry, we got to.
Oh, let's see. Well, I grew up in U.S.A, and at the time, in the summer months, if you were a teenager and you wanted a job, the only place to get a job was at the U.S.A Candy Company. So here comes this, young man, and I was working when the trucks would come in with the peas and the corn and the beets and whatnot. I was the mistress or the whatever of the scale, not master scale, but anyhow. So anyhow, I did that, and then one day comes this young man driving this truck with peas, and he comes up for his weight slip, and he said, "Oh, would you go out with me?" I said, "No." I had no idea who he was. When you're a small town girl, you only date small town boys. I know nothing about this man, so I said no. So I think I've maybe been about 4 or 5 times. "Would you please go out with me?" And it's like, "Oh, okay." And all I can say then, I think the rest is history. But I remember the first time he came to pick me up, and my sisters were up on the 2nd floor in their bedrooms overlooking our front of the house, and they said, "Oh my gosh, Noreen, couldn't you have done better? He's bald already." Yeah, so, but yeah, so the rest is history. Yeah.
How did he feel about his involvement in the nickname? Did it come up a lot? Was he proud of it, or was it just one of those things that kind of happened and he didn't talk about a lot? Or did people recognize him as the person who had really set the events in motion?
No, he really didn't. He didn't want he wasn't out there, so in the limelight, so to say, no. He loved Verona. He really loved Verona because Ernie Johnson was his only barber. In fact, my husband was in an accident when I think he was 7 or 8. And so he was in a full body cast for months. So Ernie Johnson would come out to the farmhouse and cut his hair. So Ernie Johnson was his only barber until Ernie retired, and then Nikki took it over. But yeah, even though we moved to DeForest, and DeForest we really didn't have a barber in DeForest. It's just hair salons. But no, we had to drive all the way to Verona to get a haircut. But then also, he only banked at one bank his entire life, and that was the Bank of Verona, and then the Bank of Cross Plains. Why we didn't move to Verona, I don't know, because he never talked fondly of DeForest. He never talked fondly of U.S.A, but he really loved Verona. So yeah. But his father was Roy Schmidt, and he had the Standard Oil route. So yeah.
So he delivered, did you say he delivered to like houses for
He
oil?
delivered to houses and also to construction sites. But my husband really didn't want the business, so then my mother-in-law gave the business up as well.
Well, so you said he had the choice of going to either Verona High School or Madison Central, and I assume he did actually go to Verona High School then.
He did go to Verona High School, right, and I do have his yearbook as well as his graduation program, and then a photo of all the classmates as well. Yeah. And he attended all the reunions outside of when he was in service. Yeah.
That was great too.
Year did he graduate?
Oh,
He graduated in 1960. He was born in 1942, April. Yeah. And he had one brother, Jerry. And then when Donald came home from Vietnam, his brother was sent over to Vietnam. And his brother was in 2 tours in Vietnam. And he was a gunner on a helicopter. And needless to say, Jerry came home in good physical shape. But back then they didn't know what, I always get this mixed.
PTSD.
Right, they didn't know at that time what it was. And so it was difficult for Jerry as well as us as family. But Jerry has since passed as well. He passed about, I want to say about 20 years ago. He died an early death. Yeah, Don's father served in World War II with the military police. And the troop that his father was in liberated one of the concentration camps as well. And his father did have photos and other items that he brought home with him. And those I donated to the state right, the Veterans Museum. And Donald had said that when his father was in World War II and they liberated a concentration camp, I don't know the levels of, major, sergeant, or whatever, but whoever was in charge of that unit had told the guys, okay, you can take 2 items home here from the camp. And so his father took a German compass and a German revolver. And those should be with the Veterans Museum as well as the photos. Mm-hmm.
Where is his, I tried to research his father for this. Where is his final resting place? Is it in Wisconsin?
His father, his mother, and his brother are buried over at Sunset Memory Gardens.
Okay.
Right, and my husband had said that when they were developing Sunset Memory Gardens, which is right across from Easttown, that the sales personnel were beating on everybody's door here in the Verona area. And so they went and bought 4 lots at the time.
Oh, this one at Westtown, right? Over by Gammon Road.
Mhm.
And North Point, yeah.
Right.
Did anyone y'all know Donald perchance? Anyone?
Did you?
Yeah, I was a senior when I was a freshman.
Oh, really?
Arlene's
You-
brother was a classmate.
And who was your classmate?
My brother was in the same class.
What was your-
Tried to share.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember anything specific about him, like other?
Well, only because I'm a freshman, he's a senior, so.
Oh, did you know him too?
He was a Legion.
Oh, did you know?
As a Legion member.
Oh, okay. Was he active in the Legion or? Oh, cool.
They used to have some pretty good class reunions. Bill Winnicky was in the same class? Yeah. Okay. Yep, so they're all in that picture.
Oh my gosh. So we're gonna have, I think we're passing around some, we're also gonna have the pictures up here. Everyone come look at here. Noreen, do you wanna grab a seat? I'd love to keep you up here while we go through the last few articles. I had seen the one article, the back and forth, but I didn't realize kind of I keep saying like the ripples that this caused. So there's the article we showed you that Donald wrote, the letter saying I really appreciate it. Then the big one came on July 21st in 1966. That's when the paper published it. But this is I'm gonna read this and I'll do it clearly as possible. But dear Mr. Schrader, that's Hank, the Verona Press, I'm writing this at the request of the entire detachment. We've come from all over the country to fight this war to preserve the United States. One of our members is from your town. The spirit shown from your printing of his letter has helped the morale of our unit. It is a rare thing for us to receive any recognition at all, let alone have one of our own men, Ronald R. Schmidt, have a relatively unimportant letter printed. We have chosen your home as the perfect example of hometown USA. And then exactly as Noreen said, though many of us are from big towns, we've decided it's the little town that personifies our country. And you mentioned too, the Win-A-Bike contest they call out. Besides the friendliness of your paper, the Win-A-Bike contest, we're enclosing 2 subscriptions to give to the most deserving boy to help them win a bicycle. We feel this sort of contest shows the American competitive spirit. So that's pretty cool. And then at the bottom of the paper, Hank has a response. The village and this newspaper are most flattered by your recent letter indicating you've chosen Verona as the perfect example of hometown USA. You've asked if we would allow you to take our town as your own. The residents of this village would be most honored to have your detachment adopt this peaceful, growing community as your own. But in asking us for this privilege, you've placed a responsibility upon each of us here at home that we should stop and think about. And I'll pick the best part here. To be placed as a foster village for detachment, we must set an example of leadership in the times of stress, courage in moments of anxiety, and depth of character in times of challenge. Not unlike the challenges you and your buddies face every day. So I think Hank took this very seriously and said, if you're willing to pick us as your perfect example, we need to live up to that in all these different circumstances. Good luck, we're proud to be adopted as your perfect example. You'll hear from us. So this is on July 21st, 1966. And of course, right next to it is an article about road construction, proving that no matter what, you can never get away from road construction. I just love it. It's literally the one right next to that. And you can see it if you want to come up here. This is a scan of the article if you want to come read the whole thing later. So next up, a couple weeks later, I've just got some excerpts here. Hank calls for a response, and here's Operation Hometown Paper, begun by the ladies of the American Legion with the cooperation of the community. Word of the Hometown U.S.A. for Verona has gone far and wide. Beyond the Badger State, he says, we are certain because this newspaper has received long-distance calls from Minneapolis and other out-of-state areas expressing congratulations. So it kind of caught on outside of the immediate vicinity. And then the Legion Auxiliary is preparing to add even more servicemen's names to the list of those receiving the free press. And I want to mention too that this Operation Hometown Paper was bigger than just our area. Here are some other articles. This one's from the Austin Daily Herald and the Jacksonville Courier about their version of this program. So other cities, other American Legion auxiliaries were doing the same thing, sending these papers over to be a morale builder. Here is August. It's folks from different civic organizations getting together to decide how they can support the troops over in Vietnam. Kind of mentions about Operation Hometown Paper again. Hank Schrader's there. Then this is August, there's a full page kind of dedication to servicemen of Vietnam from Hometown USA, saying how much we appreciate it. That's kind of cool. And then here, I didn't realize this until, I found this Friday as the library was closing at 6 o'clock. Sergeant Wilson wrote back to the Verona Press. A couple really important parts. We're pleased and honored in the response of your paper. It's fine to realize there are people at home who are interested. But we as a unit have one request to make. We would like to have some more copies of the first edition, which concerns our detachment. Also more subscriptions, as the one always seems to get torn before it gets around to everyone. So it was getting ripped up, it was getting passed around. And then here, remember Beverly, the little girl with the bike I said to remember? He talks about sending in those 2 subscriptions. We think your suggestion about giving our contribution to Beverly Wagner is a good one. We'll feel honored if she will accept our contribution to the win of that contest. Even though we all don't receive mail every day, when the Verona Press arrives, it means everyone at the detachment gets mail. That gives you like a cool feeling. And here she is, here's Beverly, with her next victory. Coming partially from the donations from the service people in Vietnam. Isn't that cool? Yeah. Then last couple slides. This is thanks to Jenny, who's in the back. It's fun to find these little puzzle pieces that kind of make the picture clearer. Jenny went back at Noreen's suggestion to look through the minutes of the Women's Legion Auxiliary and found in September of '65, since the Vietnam War is going on, our local boys would like to keep in touch with home in any way, so the auxiliary is sending our hometown newspaper to them. There are 3 boys who are receiving the paper. I assume Donald was one of them that they're referring. And you've actually answered the question for this next part. There was also a note saying, our auxiliary, misspelling, took complete charge of a gathering after military services for Mr. Roy Schmidt. In November, we sent a $20 gift package to a soldier in Vietnam stationed with Mr. Schmidt's son. So it makes sense now. I couldn't figure out what that was in reference to, but if his dad passed while he was over there. So there's that care package again. So thank you, Jenny, for finding this. It really helps add another dimension to this. And last couple of slides. In September of '66, they sent a flag to Verona representing their division. Wow. So you can see, radio research detachment, brigade, 101st Division, and here we are in Verona holding up. Gosh, I'd love to know where this thing is. Wouldn't that be awesome if anyone comes across this? That would be an amazing thing to be displaying half a century later. I hadn't seen it, but so they sent the flag back to us, and it's just to let you know what it says there. The Verona Veterans of Foreign Wars recently received a replica of the flag of Vietnam from Donald Schmidt, a serviceman who was from the Verona area. Selection of Hometown U.S.A. by the Boys of 101st. It's been in newspapers and radio broadcasts across the United States. And the Verona Press is sending free copies of the weekly paper to Verona Area Servicemen who are serving Vietnam under a special arrangement. There's that arrangement again. And you were right there, Noreen, the auxiliary pays for the postage, assuring prompt delivery of the paper. You told me that they paid first-class postage. So it actually got there in time. I mean, you can imagine how long it takes a paper to get across the globe. And yeah, the last thing I want to mention is, I didn't really deep dive into the 80s, but it looks like, according to the Legion Post, that it was 1985 when the Chamber of Commerce kind of officially adopted this as our slogan. So that kind of brings it full circle. And I had no idea there was, I mean, we're all in the fourth bucket now, right? We all understand the context. And yeah, that's all I had. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Noreen or Jenny, or is Mary here, anyone else?
Yeah, over the years, my husband really did appreciate Verona. When most of our soldiers came home from Vietnam, they were not welcomed, but he always felt supported when he was over there, and even when he first came home, he felt supported. And that made a big difference. And it's really too bad that all of our veterans that came home weren't, right, yeah. I never did tell him that I wasn't in support of the Vietnam War myself, and I did protest, but I never did any damage to anything. But right, but yeah. So, and we really do need to continue to support our military. We need to support our military families. We need to continue to support our veterans.
Were you married before he went?
No, I met him after. Right, yeah. So.
Well, everyone, thank Noreen for coming and talking.